And I'm going to go back today 30 years. That's right, 30 years to my favorite All-Star game memory. 1993, the All-Star game at Camden Yards. Now, you guys know I worked a long time in Baltimore. I'm a little bit biased toward my Baltimore days. But this All-Star game was one of a kind. And the reason it was one of a kind is because Cito Gaston, the American League manager that year, stacked his team with 7 Blue Jays. There were 3 elected starters and 4 more that he named. Now, keep in mind, the selection process was different then. It wasn't this multi-tiered thing where the players had a say and then the league. It was basically the players got elected and the manager named his people. That's what Gaston did. And the Orioles at the time were a rival, as they are now, of the Blue Jays in the AL East. The Blue Jays were the power back then, of course. And Baltimore fans, seeing how the game was being played in their park, were rightly indignant over what I termed in the Baltimore Sun as the Cito 7, as if these guys were criminals, which they weren't. So there was quite a bit of anger in Baltimore about this, and I, as a columnist for the Baltimore Sun, was more than happy to stoke the flames, which I did the entire week leading up to the game. So then the game occurs, and Mike Mussina, future Hall of Famer, then a young pitcher in the major leagues, it was his second All-Star appearance. He warms up on his own in the 8th and 9th inning. Now, the bullpens at Camden Yards are fully visible to the entire crowd. The crowd saw what was happening. They were excited. Wow, Mussina's coming into the game. Awesome. Well, Mussina did not get into the game. And for the first time in All-Star history, and probably the only time this will ever happen, the home team was booed off the field. They were booed off the field because Cito had stacked the team, and then he didn't use Mussina when Mussina was warming up. Now, it turns out Mussina did this all on his own. He said he wanted to get his throwing in. To this day, I don't know if he was trying to poke the bear or not, but he nearly incited a riot, basically, is what he did. So that night, when we were all done writing, Dave Perkins of the Toronto Star came up to me in the press box, and he said, "I just want you to know, I ripped your pitcher tonight. You ripped Mussina for showing up Cito Gaston." And I told Dave, "I just want you to know, I ripped your manager." And we both kind of laughed because you have to serve your constituencies as a columnist, and we both did just that. Now, this wasn't over that night. The next day, or maybe it was the day after, I can't recall exactly, the Orioles had a workout at Camden Yards. And much to my surprise, in surveying the locker room about what happened in the All-Star game, some of the players on Mussina's own team, some of his teammates, were upset with what he did. Harold Reynolds, he was then with the Orioles. He was not yet my friend. He was a guy I was covering. He said about Mike Mussina, his teammate, he's a competitor and he's a know-it-all competitor. The man went to Stanford. That explains it right there. Now, Harold said that with a smile, but his comment was on the record, and it was a pretty strong comment to say the least. Another quote from another Oriole, David Segui. He said of Mussina, "That's a little bit beyond what I thought he was capable of." Now, there were mixed reactions in that clubhouse. Some of the Orioles loved what Mussina did. Cal Ripken, the night before, had actually said, "I don't think the baseball fans here in Baltimore will ever forget this." Cal Ripken said that. He was not exactly Mr. Controversial. But in the end, Mussina tried to apologize to Cito Gaston, or planned to apologize, and eventually did apologize. But at one point, Cito, who was really upset about what he perceived again as Mussina showing him up, he had this quote, and it was a doozy. The quote was, "By standing up, warming up essentially, he showed me he's a person with little class. Screw him. I just won't take him on the All-Star team. Next year, he showed very little class as a person." They eventually patched things up, I think. Not sure. But it was the most absurd, ridiculous, hilarious controversy, and really it was over nothing. So it's my favorite memory. It's my favorite memory because when I was criticizing first Gaston and then Mussina, or at least not criticizing Mussina, but kind of making fun of him for stirring it up like he did, I called him Dennis the Menace in print and other things. It just was basically something where no one really got hurt. It was not a serious issue. That is my favorite memory. The 1993 All-Star Game, 30 years ago, the home team booed off the field. Doesn't get any better than that.